The 2022 NFL schedule comes out tonight. Wish list for me, I'll talk about it. Plus, Jason Moore from the Fantasy Footballers joins me for two amazing segments. One about his thoughts about the Cardinals offseason, and the second about everything you need to know about fantasy football come 2022. Here we go.
You are Locked On Cardinals, your daily Arizona Cardinals podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome in, Locked On Cardinals. Alex Clancy here. Follow me on Twitter at Clancy's Corner. Follow the podcast at Locked On AZ Cards. Please subscribe to the YouTube channel as well. And you can check me out today on the Locked On NFL National Show with Tyler Rowland from Locked On Titans, both on the Locked On NFL YouTube channel and Locked On NFL podcast platforms, free and available wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks for making Locked On Cardinals your first listen each and every day. Again, free and available on all platforms. Jason Moore from the #1 ranked fantasy football podcast in the world, the Fantasy Footballers, will join me for two segments today. First segment, talking about the Arizona Cardinals offseason, what he thinks about Cliff, what he thinks about Steve Keim, and what he thinks about the trajectory of Kyler Murray. And then the second segment that we're going to have a discussion about is all fantasy football news regarding the Arizona Cardinals. It's going to be fun. And a little programming note here, coming up tonight, I will be doing a live reaction after the unveiling of the 2022 NFL schedule that will act as my Friday podcast. I'll be going live on YouTube and posting the podcast immediately to all the platforms you get for free. Because remember, ain't no paywalls here on the Locked On Podcast Network. So first segment here, I'm just going to discuss a couple things about the 2022 schedule. I feel like with DeAndre Hopkins being out for the first 6 games, I talked yesterday about how I think that they need to go out and sign a wide receiver anyways, because the Cardinals have the second toughest strength of schedule. That was based on last year's win-loss record by their opponents for this year. The issue that I have with people saying that, oh, well, that was last year, things have changed. Yeah, look at how much better the AFC West has gotten. Cardinals played the AFC West teams. Russell Wilson, Devontae Adams, Chandler Jones, Khalil Mack for the Chargers. Yes, losing Tyreek Hill, but, I mean, the Chiefs are always going to be the Chiefs, and I feel like they're not going to miss Tyreek Hill as much as people may think right now. I'm going to ask Jason Moore about that briefly in the third segment. But my wish list is that the Cardinals have an easier road through the first 6 weeks. This is going to be a difficult schedule regardless, but playing a couple teams from the NFC South through the first 6 weeks, namely Carolina and maybe even New Orleans, would be beneficial for this roster. What I hope does not happen is that they play a front-loaded AFC West schedule, playing 2 AFC West teams in the first 6 weeks. Now, I'm not sure of the exact construct of where the divisional games are going to go and where the bonus games, the wild card games will go. I don't know what the stencil is for the 2022 NFL schedule yet, but from what we've seen so far, over the last handful of years, they're going to get at least one interdivision game in the first couple, and then you're going to end with at least one, if not 2, in Week 17 and Week 18 of interdivision games. Wish list, NFC South up front, not named Tampa Bay, and maybe even a Seattle if you're going to have an interdivision game early. And wish against list is the AFC West being prevalent in the Cardinals schedule during the first 6 games with DeAndre Hopkins out. But, even with DeAndre Hopkins out, and again, I talked about this yesterday as well, that's not a make or break for the Cardinals. Like, the Cardinals can 100% win games without DeAndre Hopkins on the field. And I think that was one of the biggest, scapegoats last year for Cliff Kingsbury, et cetera, was, DeAndre Hopkins was out. So that's why the Cardinals faltered. I don't think that's the case. I mean, he is a wide receiver 1, and they're going to miss him, but that doesn't mean that the Cardinals can't win games, even though they're against tough opponents early on, if that were to be the case. Jason Moore from the Fantasy Footballers is going to join me next. We're going to talk Cardinals, and we're going to talk fantasy football as it pertains to the Arizona Cardinals. You don't want to miss the next two segments. That's next. First, Built Bar. Built Bar. Built Bar. What more can I say about these delectable, delicious treats that are good for you? Built Bar, they're covered in chocolate. I think we mentioned that. They're high in protein, low in calorie, high in fiber, low in carbs. It's everything you want to ingest when you need something on the go without all of the crapola that comes with other things you can eat. Built Bar has done blind taste tests with candy bars, and they've won. Like, these flavors are not flavors that you'd expect to come from a healthy protein bar, like banana cream pie, to name one, raspberry double chocolate, and they're all covered in chocolate. I mean, not really sure how you'd expect them to be good for you, but they are. Okay, they've got these protein-infused marshmallow things they call puffs, chocolate-covered, 19 grams of protein, 4 grams of sugar, 130 calories, 4 net carbs. That's the average. It's real, and you got to jump on board the Built Bar train. Go to Built.com to get all your favorites, as I mentioned before. And look at this, banana cream pie, raspberry, and so many more. They're so delicious, and new flavors are coming out all the time. Check them out at Built.com. Go to Built.com. Use promo code LOCKED15 to get 15% off your order. Use promo code LOCKED15 for 15% off at Built.com. All right, second segment, friend of the show, one of the hosts of the top-ranked fantasy football podcast on the planet is joining me right now. Jason Moore from the Fantasy Footballers. Lives here in Phoenix, dude. Homegrown fantasy football talent with one of the sexiest sets you'll ever see. Dude, thanks for joining me, man. How are things?
Things are good. I mean, your background looks pretty nice too. So we're pretty much even here.
Yeah, you know what? Your family raised you right. Just compliment. Even if you don't necessarily agree with it. I don't have that cool ass logo behind me. Okay, so here's the thing. First of all, thanks for making Locked On Cardinals your first listen each and every day. Follow me on Twitter at Clancy's Corner. Follow Jason Moore, Jason FFL. You're a local in Phoenix, okay? You watch the Cardinals. You're a wee guy Cardinals fan, which says a lot, okay? Especially for you being in the industry. And I don't mean that as a backhanded compliment. You know exactly what I mean.
Yeah.
What has your front row seat looked like for this offseason as it pertains to a fantasy football-less Arizona Cardinals organization?
Not good. I mean, I don't think they did anything of note. They lost more pieces than they gained. So I would presume talent-wise, we are worse this year than we were last year. We're not replacing Chandler Jones with, some third-round pass rusher. It's not going to happen. And the addition of Hollywood Brown, I thought was brilliant. Anytime that Steve Keim can get a veteran instead of making a pick, I'm pretty much on board. He's had a real good track record of picking up solid, proven NFL commodities, far better than drafting the hopeful talent. So, and I love Hollywood, the age, the contract, the familiarity with Kyler. I was super happy. And then obviously the unfortunate PED suspension for Hopkins threw a bucket of water on my fire. But I would say overall, my 30,000 foot view is we are worse now than we were at the end of last year, talent wise.
Jason Moore at Jason FFL on Twitter. It's Steve Keim he's known for many things, but one thing he's definitely known for is overcorrection. And he went from Steve Wilkes to Cliff Kingsbury. What we're seeing from 2020 and 2021, the Isaiah Simmons and Zaven Collins draft back-to-back, trading for Hollywood Brown and then drafting Trey McBride, is a quintessential Steve Keim overcorrection. Now, I agree with you because I was up in arms on draft night. I thought offensive line, corner, edge rusher, like those had to be it, or a run stopper, interior defensive line would benefit this team a lot more than drafting than trading for a wide receiver who's had a 1,000-yard season, even though, obviously in Baltimore, it's run the ball and play defense. With the acquisition of Trey McBride and Hollywood Brown, do you see that even though roster-wise the edge rusher position is taking a step back and the cornerback position has stood pat, which wasn't great from the end of last year, that this offense could lead this team as the anchor, as the strength, where it hasn't necessarily been over the second half of the last 2 seasons?
Oh, it has to. Our offense is the strength. And when Cliff Kingsbury is your head coach, Kyler is your quarterback, it should be. It should be the strength. It should be the persona. When you think about the Arizona Cardinals, you should think about a high-tempo, fast-paced, high-scoring, air raid style offense. And I hope, that the nice thing is when, the last 2 years we've collapsed at the end. I think part of that was due to, we were so much worse without Hopkins. We just had no answer. But having Hollywood, getting used to how to play without him, and then adding Hopkins back on top of that, maybe we get stronger as the season goes on. I don't think Trey McBride, I love Trey McBride. Like, I'm pre-draft, huge fan of Trey McBride. The fact that he comes to the Cardinals, that's just a cherry on top. Mm-hmm. But rookie tight ends, they don't do much. He's going to be a special teamer. He'll get in a little bit, on offense, but he's not a needle mover. He's going to be a Zach Ertz replacer down the line, not someone that makes a big offensive impact on the team in 2022.
Yeah, and he's got the George Kittle comp, so he's definitely be able to help in with block and Max Williams when he's back and healthy. So, yeah, offensively, it's like, and I talked about this yesterday, with the strength of schedule being so tough, we're going to get to fantasy here in just a minute. With strength of schedule being so tough, we're going to find out everything about every single person. Kyler Murray, Cliff Kingsbury, Steve Keim. How Steve Keim builds a roster, how Cliff Kingsbury coaches a potent offense, and if Kyler Murray can take that next step. Because the AFC West ain't no joke. There's 2 teams in the NFC South that ain't no joke. Like, we're going to find out very quickly how this offense can mesh together quickly and see if they can add some pieces on defense. I want to talk to you about fantasy. I've got 7 more minutes with you, and I'm going to use all 420 seconds on that. You see that quick math? That's what we do here on Locked On Cardinals. Thank you very much. Jason Moore from Fantasy Footballers joining me here. Coming up next, all you need to know about fantasy football implications as it pertains to the Arizona Cardinals players. That's next. First, BetOnline.net. BetOnline is your number one source for all your sports betting needs and info, everything you need. Find all the latest odds, news, and sports developments, including this year's basketball playoffs. Check out the Suns. The fluctuation of the Suns' odds to win the NBA championship seemingly go up and down after every game. It's insane. BetOnline is your continued source for all your sports wagering information, from live betting to playoffs, esports, and more. Go to the website or use your mobile device today to learn more about the trends in action. BetOnline, where the game starts. Follow him at JasonFFL on Twitter, the number 1 ranked fantasy football podcast on the planet. If you like comedy and entertainment, they've got the Spitballers Pod. You and your boys do a fantastic job. TheFantasyFootballers.com. You can find him everywhere. He's a great Twitter follow. Again, loves the Arizona Cardinals. And
the Phoenix Suns.
Phoenix Suns, sure.
Come on.
Sure.
Okay. I just didn't want them to be left out. If, it's 'tis the season.
I mean, 'tis the season, even though football reigns supreme. We'll find out what's going on tonight with the schedule release. I'm a huge proponent. Let me ask you this quickly before we jump into fantasy. I'm a huge proponent of the Cardinals signing another wide receiver regardless, because of how difficult their schedule is. And I'm talking like a Danny Amendola, just to be an adult in the room for the first 6 weeks. Run, turn around, catch the ball kind of thing. A placeholder that's going to cost less than $1 million, $1 million guaranteed. I know that the wide receiver room is full, but they're going to need to add a lot of pieces. Do you think adding a wide receiver for the first 6 weeks is necessary, or are you just going to have to trust Hollywood Brown as the wide receiver 1 and, Rondale Moore's emergence?
I don't think we have to. If we were to add a piece, I don't think Danny Amendola is going to do anything positive for us. If we were to add a Jarvis Landry, move Hollywood to the Hopkins role, the problem is the way that Cliff uses Hopkins is, I don't know if you've looked at Hopkins' route tree. We
Yeah.
call it a route bush
Yeah,
on the
yeah,
fantasy footballers because it's just non-existent. It's just like running this little area right here, and that is not Hollywood Brown. Now, I would hope that Cliff would open up Hollywood from the outside, but someone like a Jarvis Landry would probably be worth it because of the 6-week gap, but I doubt we do it.
All right, fair enough. All right, so let's pivot here. The first thing you told me last year as I was drafting in my dynasty draft was Kyler Murray is going to be your quarterback one from 2021. Now, obviously, we didn't see the injuries, and then DeAndre Hopkins went down, but he still had a solid fantasy football year. Where do you see Kyler Murray? Because, I mean, it's stacked at the top now for quarterbacks, man. I mean, Justin Herbert, Patrick Mahomes, Tom Brady kind of on the outside looking in. You always have Aaron Rodgers. Where is Kyler Murray? Is he still a top 3, top 4 fantasy football quarterback?
He is still a top fantasy football quarterback. Yes. I don't know. Last year he was my quarterback one. It seemed great going into the season until the Hopkins injury. I think he might have been the quarterback one at that point, and then the wheels fell off. Josh Allen is the clear-cut quarterback one. I think he's in a tier of his own. If you're looking at, other options near the top, you can make it. I think he's like in the tier with Lamar Jackson, even Pat Mahomes and Justin Herbert. Mahomes has lost pieces. I think I would take Herbert over Kyler, but Kyler might be in that 3 to 5 mix with guys like Lamar Jackson and Patrick Mahomes.
Yeah, and when you said that they drafted Trey McBride, it's like, well, in a dynasty, it's like you may have to wait a little bit longer if you're going to draft him for him to have an immediate impact because they have so many pieces. Are we looking at, like, from the rest of the wide receivers, Hollywood Brown, AJ Green, even DeAndre Hopkins and Rondale Moore, are we looking at like a Sean Payton, New Orleans Saints, Marcus Colston, Robert Meacham? Like, you never know who's going to be the guy, or is there somebody in this group that you see as a second-round talent, even including DeAndre Hopkins, because he's missing 6 games?
Yeah, I've statted out the Arizona Cardinals. I've got about a third of the NFL league statted out, and the way that I broke down the Cardinals team, Hopkins is really someone that in fantasy this year, pretty much I don't even know if you can draft him. He's got a target issue coming in with Hollywood there, and you're going to have to hold on to him on your bench for 6 weeks. And because of a suspension, you can't like throw him in an IR spot if you have one of those. So he's actively hurting your team for darn near half of the regular fantasy football season. I think the player you want is Hollywood Brown. Hollywood Brown, he was on fire to start last year. Lamar Jackson got injured and, the wheels fell off there, but he's very talented. He has a history with Kyler Murray. Hopkins is gone. So going into your drafts, do I think that Hollywood is going to be a phenomenal player from week 1 to week 17? Probably not. But to start the season, and that's so important in fantasy football, I think he will be great and probably undervalued in drafts because of kind of the changing teams. You're not sure if he's the 1 or the 2, but I'm fine drafting him where he's going to be at his average draft position and just getting off to a super hot start the year.
Yeah, which is important. Jason Moore, Fantasy Footballers, #1 ranked fantasy football podcast on the planet, at Jason FFL on Twitter. One more here for you. James Conner is he's a great story. He does have he got Arian Fostered in Pittsburgh, where he got run into the ground for a year and a half. He had great numbers. And even though they paid him a handsome, some cheese, I'm still in the camp that they need to sign another running back to keep him healthy for 17 weeks. Is he potentially a trade high target if you have him going into this year in a keeper league or a dynasty league? Or do you think that he can replicate 75% to 80% of what he did last year in this offense?
I think he can definitely replicate it. You go back to Kenyon Drake, the Arizona Cardinals offense, when they get down inside the 5, they run the ball. Mm-hmm. And the touchdown scoring will be there for whoever the Arizona Cardinals running back is. And so long as James Conner is healthy, that's obviously a big question with him. He's missed a lot of games over time. But, these players are injury risks until they're not. It's hard to even fathom. But the first few years of Frank Gore's career, he always an injury risk. Like you're just waiting for him to break. And then he became the most Iron Man player of all time.
Yeah.
So James Conner, he's gone through a lot. I mean, you're talking cancer survivor in his NFL career, couple of fluke injuries. Could he get injured? Sure. Will he get injured? I mean, he's a running back. Most of them do. Almost no running backs play 17 games. But in the games that he played from weeks 3 on last year, when they really kind of said, oh, this guy's our best running back, he was the running back 3 in fantasy football over that time. He has every opportunity to be the top 5 running back this season, barring injury. So if you're just super worried about the injury risk and you can find someone who values him like that, sure, ship him off. But I would argue, tell me a guy that doesn't have an injury risk at running back. Jonathan Taylor, sure, he's younger. We've never seen the injuries. Okay. That's it. End of Christian McCaffrey. Oh, no, he's a huge injury risk.
Derrick Henry,
Dalvin Cook, everybody deals with injuries. So, the super young guys, maybe they're your safest bet, Breece Hall and Jonathan Taylor. And then outside of that, everyone's going to get injured. So go ahead and take the guy on a good offense. And he lost Chase Edmonds. You look at the splits with and without Chase Edmonds last year, it's like 6 fantasy points more a game. And he was good when Chase Edmonds was there.
Yeah. It's going to be exciting. Jason Moore at Jason FFL on Twitter. One of the hosts of the top-rated fantasy football podcast on the planet, the Fantasy Footballers. Jason, thanks so much for joining me, dude. Really appreciate it. Schedule release tonight. I will be doing my Friday podcast live tonight after the unveiling of the 2022 NFL schedule. Alex Clancy, Locked On Cardinals. I'll talk to you then.
Have a good one.